Hi there, and welcome everyone to the State of Future Food Tech, AgTech, and CPG Innovations conversation with the South by Southwest Future of Food program. My name is Dana Gunders, and I will be your moderator today. I'm the Executive Director of ReFed, a national nonprofit that is entirely focused on reducing food loss and waste in the US through data-driven solutions. And I am just thrilled to be here with a powerhouse of ladies to discuss just the future of food and how tech will play a role in all of this today. So yeah, just to kick us off and get us started, quickly I'd like to introduce, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves a little bit further. We have Chiara Cecchini. She's the CEO at Future Food Americas, and she is leading the corporate innovation unit there. And I'll let her give you more information about that. We have Riana Lynn, who's the CEO of Journey Foods, a food tech company that supports cutting edge product management and data services for food businesses. And Riana has a long storied career doing all sorts of things in the food and tech industry. And then we have Kirstin Ross, who is joining us. She is the managing director of SKU, a world-class program that accelerates emerging CPG brands through a thriving community of serial entrepreneurs and industry experts. So thrilled to have this conversation today. And to kick us off, ladies, I would love to hear kind of what your thoughts are on where we're going, right? And specifically like how it's going to change our lives. So if you would talk a little bit about sort of where you see tech going as it relates to food and ag, and what's one thing in our day-to-day lives around food, shopping, cooking, eating that might be different in 10 years? And Kirstin, why don't you kick us off?
Thank you so much for having me. I think it's a really interesting question, especially in the light of the last year, because we have seen so many consumer trends change in the way that they acquire food that is now technology driven. And I think the rate of change that's happened in the last year was what was expected to happen over the next 10 years. So a very interesting thought is how much of that is going to be sticky in the consumers' shopping and buying behaviors. And I mean, I think most specifically, we can talk about just the move towards online grocery, which was up, well over 100%. And the amount of individuals who bought their groceries through online channels has absolutely skyrocketed. And because of that, in the consumer packaged goods space, in the food space and beverage space specifically, there's a way to really have emerging brands interact differently with having customer trials and doing customer acquisition. So I don't know about anybody else, but I've exclusively gone to Instacart. The last time I stepped foot in a grocery store was probably when we were doing the scared water run at the beginning of March. And I think there's so much of the consumers that are going to be shopping through these online platforms. And I think that's going to make a major impact in the brands that are discovered, because you're able to now market to a consumer who's grocery shopping in a way that you typically would acquire a D2C customer. So that's a huge change. I think the sticky factor of that is here to stay.
Dana, thank you so much for the introductions. I'm very happy to represent Journey Foods and the B2B software side. For us, we think about the fact that just thousands of companies have to manage millions of product lines for 8 billion eaters in the coming years. And at Journey Foods, we're focused on finding the best data specifically around nutrition, sustainability, and cost. That's really going to save a tremendous amount of time and money for the companies that are bringing products in to us. Operations have to improve over the past year, and we'll talk about this, I think, throughout this panel around how COVID has really affected business operations. But particularly for me, outside of just what we're focused on, I think some of the biggest changes, I would have to agree with Kirstin around shopping and access to food. But also, I think what we're going to find is throughout the world, especially when you think about fast growing populations in Asia and Africa, that plant-based foods will take off at a faster clip than we originally thought in the new roaring 2020s. So I'm very excited to see how sort of the duality of both health and sustainability when it comes to plant-based innovation and the growth within emerging economies. And even back here in the United States, Black vegans are growing at a very rapid rate. I mean, it's not a new part of our community history, but it's definitely in terms of access and cost is great. And I think every company needs to think about how we are also serving our most marginalized and our most health adverse here, even in the US, when we're creating food and creating food that's also accessible by cost.
Oh my goodness, so much there. Wait, before we go on to Chiara though, I want to kind of follow up on one point you made, which is that emerging countries are looking to potentially consume more plant-based product than maybe we originally expected and projections, et cetera. And I'm wondering if what's behind that?
You know, absolutely. I think one of the most fascinating studies or sort of research that's coming out around consumers is that some of the meats that we eat today will be more like high-end sort of delicacies, experiences. You know, when we go and we travel to most countries, I know when I started traveling outside of the US in my teenage years, it was quite shocking to me that like some of my cousins in like the Southwest didn't know what a mango was. And you go to like the center of Mexico, you go to West Africa, and you know, fruits and whole foods are quite abundant. And so while the narrative is really interesting coming here around these developing countries, and I want to continue conversation about that, you're seeing that, you know, access to brand marketing, grocery stores, grocery delivery, solutions, alternatives to Amazon and other countries will be able to deliver faster plant-based packaged foods that taste great. And you'll see, just like mobile phones have taken off in these regions, you'll see that with plant-based innovations as well.
Awesome. All right, Chiara, to you.
Yeah, thank you again for having me here. You asked us to give a little bit of introduction. I am leading the corporate innovation part at Future Food Institute, and also leading our American branch, which is Future Food Americas. And so throughout our work, we do a lot of innovation, like product innovation, mainly with big and medium companies on the food and beverage space. And I should say that especially this year, we saw a big change in interest, kind of like an acceleration of a few trends. The first one that comes into my mind, which is something that I think will change in our daily life, is definitely around climate beneficial eating and the focus of the climate impact that is getting more and more importance while we pick our foods. And so if I think of going to grocery shop in five years, I can easily see how instead of just looking at the nutritional label, we definitely gotta look at also at the carbon emission and the climate label, if you want to call it like that. There are a few examples that we have been already working on in 2020 around this. There are a few food service chain, Panera is one, Just Salad is another one, that have been putting climate labels on their menus. And so you just, every time you choose a product and a salad, a bowl, you just see also not only the nutritional content, but also the impact on the environment. So I definitely see that as one of the main change that we'll have in the consumer life.
Got it. Let me play off that a little bit. So Kirstin's kind of talking about the like great migration to online shopping, and Chiara, you're getting at that more information that will be available. I'm curious, kind of, I feel like there you know, when I go on one of these online shopping, it feels very flat to me, and it feels very two-dimensional, if you will. And like, there's so much room to grow there in terms of what we could do with information and like customer assistance and customer service almost in the online shopping experience. And I'm curious if any of you have thought about that or encountered it, of like, what will the online shopping experience be in 10 years, and what portion of shopping will it actually represent?
My mind was going in the same direction as you, Dana. And just with all of this information readily accessible, and just, you know, standards being set and applying that to the products that are on the shelf. And if they're being purchased in a technology platform, it's such an easy way for you to provide so much more robust information instead of fitting it, you know, on the small label, right? That's heavily regulated by the FDA and other, you know, bodies, and, you know, people wanting a design impact to it. So you can still have all of that actually on the package, but the ability then to kind of click down and provide the information within, you know, let's just say a grocery store platform. I mean, that just needs to be developed, right? From a tech perspective, and frankly, could be fairly easy. I know that some really great new marketplaces like Thrive or Hive have bubbled up with kind of niche focuses on what sort of products and what their sort of standards are for the products that they support on their platform. And I do believe that this is just going to give a huge amount of white space for marketplaces to develop, where customers of a certain interest or wanting additional information can absolutely be able to access that in real time. I do know that there's a lot of food tech coming out of the Minneapolis area about tracking of, you know, various grains that are getting dumped in with, you know, certain bins and crates that are developed, and allowing there to be just more transparency in the full life cycle of products. So not necessarily just a product that's sitting there, but tracking down the ingredients and the sourcing of ingredients that got them in to the actual packages. And with the intersection of technology and more traditional food, I think we're going to see just massive amounts of innovation there. And to talk to your very flat platforms that you think from a grocery perspective, let's think about the traditional grocers, right? I mean, they've been doing business pretty much the same way for a very long time, right? Maybe it was Whole Foods, who's, you know, of course, near and dear to my heart, who gave us alternatives, whether it is their grading of meat-based products or produce. And that was a huge departure from, say, the HEBs or, you know, the more traditional grocery store chains. So consider this the traditional grocery store chain creating a technology platform, right? And we're just going to have to, you know, hold our breath, but probably not for too long, for somebody to really knock that out of the park and creating the actual tech platform to enable it.
Yeah, and absolutely. I want to jump in there. I think there's so much data that can be generated from consumers, as well as innovation and, you know, perhaps, you know, 3D experiences, AR experiences in grocery shopping. And I'll get into 2 points here, but one thing that I know, even with the Journey Foods platform, is that we're integrating with all the way into customer purchase behavior through credit cards and helping understand data that's key and dear to our customers' hearts. And so I think when you think of the Instacart experience or some of the platforms that are bringing smaller grocers onto marketplaces, we have to cater to a fast-growing set of consumer needs. And so, Kirstin, as you discussed, like the breadth of information that can be shared outside of just like your traditional packaging, I think is really important. Another thing that we are going to face is the fact that the rapid growth in online shopping has really taken us a step back in climate impact around packaging. And so consumers are really turning into and trying to drive companies into understanding and being more transparent about how they're packaging, operationalizing, improving shipments and keeping less and maintaining less climate impact as we shift online. And so I think the transparency around purchasing decisions can be quite effective, and more companies will innovate over the next couple of years. I also believe that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to infuse things like biometrics, right? So when we were investing in companies at Cleveland Avenue, one thing we were looking at is like heat maps, like where is the customer looking on the label? Where are they looking on the website? How can we optimize information? And these are things that are just like very hard to capture in a regular grocery store setting. So I think even though we were quite accelerated over the past year in terms of online e-commerce experience, I think over the next 2 to 3 years, you'll find a lot of innovations come out where we improve that experience, whether it be augmented reality or just the actual data that shows up on a product page. That's very beneficial to not only the supply chain, but actually the eater.
And I'm actually bringing, I think, probably a different angle, since we work a little bit less with technology and more like with consumers a lot, and talking to consumers and testing with them. I totally agree with what Riana said around, especially augmented reality in terms of creating like a more powerful storytelling and a more immersive experience. Because at the end of the day, I mean, yesterday I was at the farmer's market in Oakland, and I mean, there is that piece of experience that you don't have. Like in a flat screen, it's so different. Just meeting people and having a chat and trying to understand where this product is coming from and how they grew it. So I think there is a component around kind of like shaping that experience from a sensory perspective. The other thing is also there is a taste that definitely that is missed here, which is the sense which is missed here, which is the taste. So you can't really just like get a sample and try to understand how this product tastes like. And so I don't know, I don't have an answer, but I see as a signal the fact that companies like Amazon in the past couple of years, they have been implementing these return policies, which basically leads everybody to just buy a ton of stuff, especially in this rich part of the world, see if they like it and then return it if they don't. So I'm wondering how this could be applied to food. If maybe like companies will try to give samples of like to people in order to engage people and people's taste buds before committing to a purchase, or I don't know, going in the different, like with food trucks, going in different areas of the cities and allowing people to taste some products. But I do think there would be this combination of I locally here make you taste this product with the overall digital experience.
Yeah, I just want to jump in quickly there. That's a great point. There was an investor, I think Big Idea Ventures mentioned that out of Singapore, they were rating their next group of investments, and they actually had drivers that went from this one chef headquarters to all of the judges and investors at the same time and dropped off samples to them. I don't think that's like quite as efficient with using a ton of gas, but Chiara, I think definitely sort of the hybrid experience of like tasting, whether it's sample boxes or trucks or stations, will be a part of this experience as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember a conversation I had with the CEO of Fresh Direct, who had, which is an online-only grocer in the New York area, and they have this star rating program for how their produce tastes. And it was like this banner that they were holding up. People trusted their rating of taste so much that they felt like they could introduce these new products that people didn't even know or that looked bad, right? The ugly produce, whatever it was. And they would be like, if it was a 5-star rating on taste, it would just fly off the shelf. And there was an element of trust there that kind of, I guess people had the same taste, right? And would agree with that. And I'll also just chime in that from the waste perspective, I find the online shopping trend to be like have a lot of potential, but also potentially have a lot of detriment, because that same CEO once said to me, if I could have all of my orders 3 days in advance, I would have virtually no waste in my operations, right? So much of the waste at retail is because of the guessing game of what people are going to buy. And yet, at the same time, the move to online shopping also is a move to instant gratification, right? And it's not online shopping 5 days from now, generally speaking. It's online shopping and can you be at my door in 2 hours? And so I think there's sort of an opportunity there, but we're going to miss it if all we're about is that like really fast answer, at least from the waste perspective. Because then what happens is the flip side. If I have to get you something in 2 hours, I have to have it already prepared and ready to go and waiting on hand for you. And if you never come to buy it, then it winds up going to waste often. All right, well, we talked a little bit about sort of that consumer experience shopping. Let's go back upstream. What about the supply chain? What are we seeing in the supply chain in terms of trends now and, things that might look quite different in the future? And Riana, given your business, I will start with you.
Well, I mean, the supply chain is so complex. I mean, honestly, for us, at least at Journey Foods, we're really looking at 3 key areas of the supply chain, and that's just optimizing around costs. There's lots of data there that help both the companies as well as the end consumer. So cost is always going to be a part of the equation here. Packaging is going to be quite big. And I don't know, Kirstin, maybe you can speak to this, but as snacking becomes a larger part of consumer sort of daily behavior, we're finding that like single use obviously is not great. And so you have companies like Zero Grocer that are solving some of those issues. But, for investors, you look at some of these new plant-based companies that are coming out, but they are snack food companies and they have a ton of plastic waste, for example. And so like, how do you launch new companies that are both innovating on packaging within the supply chain as well as on clean ingredients or plant-based ingredients or cell-based ingredients? And so I think pairing sustainability with nutrition is going to be quite important in the supply chain. And then finally for us, there are so many ingredients that are tasty, nutrient dense, fair trade, just like very regenerative, that are available as indigenous ingredients out of Latin America, out of Africa, that I think just because of more geopolitical reasons, were not quite easy to at least import into North America. And what I think is going to be great is getting a lot of these ingredients, even indigenous ingredients from like parts of Canada, right, into our supply chain. And so I'm very excited about that as well, especially wonderful, very nutrient dense, very color dense ingredients out of West Africa.
Yeah, Riana, you just pointed out on just a really interesting intersection that has me a little concerned, right, about this 360 approach that we're taking to really just like improve the products that are in consumers' hands while matching the consumers' demands, right, of what they're doing. And so the millennials and the buying patterns are really shifting to a lot of single serve, single use, on the go sort of food consumption and snacking. And while we can make the actual foods better for you, groups like 7-Eleven are really making a huge push to support small emerging brands with a healthier focus to get those products on their shelf. You're at an intersection because it's not typically sustainable packaging. The true high innovation in creative packaging or sustainable packaging is either expensive for small brands to build into their overall business operations and their need to have a healthy margin to attract investors to fuel them for additional growth. It can sometimes not be as durable. And so the shipping and just kind of the packaging and the repackaging and stacking at the actual grocery level or store level becomes more product that's damaged there, or it's just slightly inconvenient. There's a great company here that allows like bulk product to be delivered, and you get your small refillable container to do that. But then again, that's not convenient if you're on the go and you just want to buy something off a store shelf. And so I think there's a healthy amount of innovation that's happening there, but there's this intersection where we're just going to have to wait for the pricing to come down a bit in the packaging, or the construction quality to get better to meet the consumer that's snacking and expecting on the go options to be available. But I do believe there's some interesting things that are coming up, and there's a huge drive and push to solve these problems. And I always love the creativity of the people who are working on these things to really, produce something that we can clear this intersection and make it to the other side.
Interesting that packaging is so at the forefront of your thoughts when we say supply chain. And the point on snacking, yeah, is fascinating. Let's move maybe to the kitchen now a little bit, right? So now let's, consumers in their homes, maybe they're snacking a lot, maybe they're eating on the go, not in their kitchens, I'm not sure. But I haven't heard any of you mention yet, when we think about food tech, some people's minds go to that smart kitchen, IoT. I've seen everything from the pans where you tell the pan that you're cooking shrimp and it cooks it just perfectly and never burns it, to asking Alexa questions about whatever. So curious kind of where you see the kitchen experience headed 10 plus years from now. Chiara, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. I should say I'm a little bit skeptical around all this technology in the kitchen. I do think it's great, and we saw like signals pointing into that. Out of the research we did and we have done in the past, it seems that it turns out to be dry to people. You have all these pieces of equipment, you can do so many things, but at the end of the day, there is a piece of staying in the kitchen which is not just functional, but it's also about enjoyment. And I think this is where right now the gap is. So if I think of how this specific piece of technologies could improve in the future, I see more around like a space around education, around entertainment. And I think there was a big push, an advancement that happened in 2020 because people found themselves stuck in the kitchen and stuck in their homes. But I think, for example, in a very different sector, but if we see what happened with meal kits, one of the main feedbacks that came out of this meal kit big trend and like people getting into meal kits is that after a few months, I'm kind of like bored because I know what to do, I know the prep, but I don't progress. I don't have any real experience. So after a while, I'm like, it's pure functional, and so I'm getting bored doing that. So I think the real opportunity is how to basically go after these 3-4 months also with the kitchen supply, appliances, and see how people can maybe with gamification increase the skill set, or anyway be entertained in their kitchen and not just having to delegate tasks to a machine.
Oh my goodness, we're gonna get points for cooking.
Yeah.
So interesting. I love that point around gamification or upskilling, so we can feel like we're more than just like the basic home chefs. But these meal delivery companies, these home IoT innovations are all very interesting. I would have to echo that a lot of them seem to fall off after a few months. For me, what I think can be most sustainable is really grocery stores taking a large control of this market. I've been a consistent HEB user of sort of their easy meal to go. And I think if you see grocery stores partnering more with brands on these like sustainable packaged, like preset meals that you just throw in your own oven or any type of oven, I think they're going to have a lot of success there, and grocery stores are going to see a lot of growth in that part of their, in that driver within their overall sales engine. You also see more grocery stores going into private label in general, but I do definitely think that like grocery stores are going to have much more success over your overall cohort of meal delivery and kit companies. I think the kitchen is so interesting. I mean, you go to Asia, you go to Hong Kong, and like people are eating out. I mean, this is before COVID, but of course things are going to shift slightly. I think you're still going to see growth of delivery companies like DoorDash and Uber Eats. There are going to be people going out back to food trucks and restaurants. And I think grocery stores are going to have to shift a little bit. In terms of cooking, I mean, it's hard to tell, but I do think that you'll see more clean eating in your home. But it's going to be quite challenged. It's going to be pretty challenged. And I think a lot of these companies are going to have to shift into larger partnerships throughout the value chain. And, you know, I think I cook more than the average millennial, but that's who knows what's going to happen with Gen Z. But I definitely think that partnerships and collaborations is going to be a part of major growth, especially post-COVID.
I mean, other than my pantry lined with cooking gadgets and technologies that I used for about 6 weeks, then go to the graveyard. You know, I think there's always going to be innovation there, but I think it's right to say that certain areas that have become really popular, the meal kits, are going to be taken over by the grocery stores. They're already happening. Target actually does a great job with their meal kits. They incorporate local regional brands within their meal kits as a way for them to kind of promote local founders, which I think is fascinating and so interesting. And because it's you know, refrigerated at their shelves, there's less shipping aspects to it, you know, like Blue Apron and things of that nature, which is cutting down, I think, a lot on the waste and still allowing people the ability, you know, to cook within their own home. From an Internet of Things vantage point, I just don't see the adoption there as a technology is presenting itself like I, you know, could have, you know, wished and hoped it would. And I'm not sure exactly what it is about the technology being available and not translating it to just becoming widely accepted. That being said, it might just be a bit of a learning curve and gaining acceptance and just kind of the internet, the interconnectivity of, you know, what the refrigerator is saying to your Alexa for your grocery list. That's going to be pre-populated in your HEB app. It's just, maybe it's just not there or working as smoothly as consumers are interested and are demanding.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think from a waste perspective, we've seen meal kits as a real opportunity because they do a lot of the behaviors that we want people to do kind of for you, right? They do the planning. They don't buy extra stuff when they're shopping. You know, they give you just the right amount of ingredients. And I think once people have that whole kit, they're really likely to make it and not kind of be like, I'm just going to not use that this week. But I think at the same time, IoT, the challenge has been inventory management, right? You might be able to scan a receipt and it might know what's in your fridge, but I'm not logging it every time I cook, every time I eat a strawberry, right? Or use like 4 spoonfuls of cottage cheese. And I don't think anyone else is either. So that, I think once you lose that inventory management, at least that side of the IoT and all of the opportunity that would be there if you could do that kind of falls away because it's just inaccurate. So
that's interesting. I do see like Amazon or some of the other e-commerce or some of the other online grocery retailers figuring out ways to use AI to understand just more of like thresholds. Like if you're getting low in certain areas, like should we maybe prepare, even some diet apps do this where they essentially prepare grocery lists for you. And I can see Instacart, Amazon, sort of Whole Foods delivery, preparing groceries for you, maybe pinging you to deliver when you're busy and telling you that you can maybe receive the delivery in 1 to 2 days. Dana, I know you mentioned sort of that instant gratification. I live in Austin, and so 3 weeks ago when we went through the storm, I ordered Instacart and it took 4 or 5 days to come. I knew that I was going to need groceries eventually once things sort of gathered back together. But I can totally wait for certain items that I know I eat all the time to be delivered on some sort of cadence.
Interesting. All right, let's take it from our kitchens, which I think we've mostly been talking about these kitchens in the US. I want to go international. Here, you know, we've alluded to developing countries, emerging economies a little bit, but how do you see the future of food tech being the same or different there? Again, let's use a 10-year time frame here.
I can start. I think it's a very good question, a very challenging question. Given the work we have done, the main answer that right now I have is that I see everything being kind of like opposite way of what we're doing here. If I think of like the kind of problems we are solving here with technology or with like product development in general, it seems to me being like extremely different. An example, like here we're trying to reduce packaging. And so we're trying to, for example, get into more dried solution. So you basically reduce your packaging, not only in food, like shampoos, like are another trend where like you're trying to reduce packaging, reduce plastic. And so you basically give dry solution, and you give that to consumers so they like work through them at home. While we are developing products for especially the African market, and there you don't have drinkable and clean water. And so the problem of plastic and packaging kind of like gets to the second level of priority while you're trying to solve for a different kind of problem. So in terms of product development, I do see that the future is extremely different, and probably we're gonna, in 10 years, we might be there. I hope we're gonna be in those emerging markets facing the challenges that we are facing. I mean, I kind of hope, I'm not sure if I hope, but partially we're gonna face those challenges there. But right now, this is not the case. And in terms of technology, I might not be the right person to talk about that, but definitely there is, yeah, I mean, like you mentioned that also in the past, like drones and like how to use drones. In that case, maybe like to get to remote areas. And so I envision a future where everywhere, actually you can get supplies. While right now the drones used here is very different because we have an infrastructure which is allowing us to reach every corner, at least of the United States for sure.
We've already been seeing like faster like acceleration and adoption of technologies that we introduced in the US 10 years ago, like Uber, for example, turns into tuk-tuks and carts and bikes in other parts of the world. And so you'll see sort of that translation locally. One thing that I found when my team spent some time in Asia is the cultural implications and changes around production of plant-based meats. So you'll find that like there's much faster growth in like swine alternatives, plant-based alternatives. So coming up with pork patties and, you know, whether they're breakfast or you know, throughout the day, coming up with different chops of, you know, pork alternatives that taste just like the original thing. You'll see probably in Africa, in West Africa and East Africa, you'll see more alternatives to seafood. And even interestingly, you know, other cuts of beef, you see 3D printed steaks coming out of Israel. So it's really, I think, just going to be driven culturally. I think the adoption of the technology is going to happen much faster in these places as they get alternative access to or newer solutions that were traditionally moonshots around like access to internet, for example. So having like now, if you think of like Google X Factory and using air balloons to provide internet beams, right, to anywhere from New Zealand to Uganda. And I think we're going to see by like 2025, like a lot more internet being accessible around the world. I'm very excited to see the manufacturing go back to places like Africa, where you have essentially all of the raw goods and ingredients being taken out and being manufactured in Europe, Asia, and North America, and then shipped back. You'll see more local manufacturing in places like that. And then they'll be able to, with great playbooks, take the same manufacturing processes, the same ingredient formulations, and turn, maybe a plant-based shrimp or fish with a much faster acceleration there. So I see developing countries just like jumping on like our shoulders of what we've built. And I think that's quite fascinating.
Yeah, I'm just going to dovetail on what I've really seen in a couple of companies that I've been personally involved with and know what they're doing very well, from skipping with information and just being seasoned and understanding the whole manufacturing process and where so many of the raw materials are being sourced from. They're skipping over a few of the traditional supply chains and getting and establishing direct access with, the manufacturing source, which allows these brands. So one is an eco-fashion company out of New York with a really amazing female founder. And she actually is going and sourcing her own cotton, understanding what that community that's farming this cotton is experiencing, using her ability to go directly to them to take some kind of standards, ethical standards and quality standards that she has understood to be important to her personally, and improve this developing country's production source. And I just think it's fascinating. And she actually is able to still maintain, the appropriate margins and cost infrastructure that she needs to, to sell her clothes, right? And she's bringing a better quality product with more transparency in the sourcing and able to kind of lift up a population base. And so I think that's, there's more people who are just getting wise to all of these mechanics that happen within their business and paying special attention and using, their ability to affect change in the way that they can. And the more the merrier. I love this.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of leapfrogging, and one thing we've seen is that specifically in the transport of food, cold chains being really lacking in some places. There's these innovative kind of technologies that use evaporative cooling without any electricity to keep product cold for a certain amount of time, or different ways to kind of high tech vacuum seal, different materials that help prevent pests from getting at things and things like that, that just kind of avoid the need of some of the infrastructure that we've built here, at least for the time being. And it'll be interesting to see if those carry over, even if, more better cold chain and that sort of things develop in those countries, or if it's just they're gonna improve on those technologies that don't even need it further, which would be super cool, I think. So one other, I think the thing about technology is that it's agnostic, right? And whatever problem, it's such a big word, there's so many different things, and it can solve whatever problem it's been trying to solve, right? And I'm curious, what worries you? Are there any tech, are there any things that are being developed right now, whether it's product development or, surrounding tech in the food industry, that is concerning you and you think, is actually going to maybe propel things in a more concerning direction?
Well, I think one we've touched on a few different times is just the consumer's desire to have everything shipped to them next day and what that looks like. And, that's not a new development, but as it takes over more and more areas of our lives, there's going to be, a negative environmental aspect to it from just the packaging. But outside of that, I'm a bit of an optimist, and I just see such interesting brands and emerging, and just innovation is there. Recycling pulp and brewer's yeast to go into new chips and crackers. I think it's great, and I see so many of those brands emerging and products coming to life. I do also love the transparency now that we're seeing in our meats and how they're sourced, if that's something that you want to do, whether it is, Katie and Taylor, who are founders of Epic Bar, and their new company, Force of Nature. It's just phenomenal, the regenerative ranching that they're doing. And I think with just so much access to information and data and idea sharing in this space, I feel like the future is pretty bright.
I do think that if you think about like how much money we've spent on like health, and 50 years ago, like our GDP was 18-19% food, 9-10% on healthcare. It's now 24% on healthcare, 8-9% on food. And it's just, as things have scaled, like that makes sense, but there's also shows you with the growth and how much we're spending on, preventable chronic diseases, that we really need to figure out ways to reverse that. And food is, pretty much the main underlying factor outside of, stress and pollution. And I think I'm very excited for the innovations that are coming out and the partnerships that are coming out, so that we can reverse what's been happening to us over the past 60 years. And so I'm optimistic, like Kirstin, with a lot of the data and innovations that are coming through. But one thing that you just can't change, no matter how fast we can ship a box of fruit or whatever, what may have you, I think technology is taking over our sense and our access to the beauty of the world and the nature of the world. And it's, there's nothing that can replace being able to see a fig tree in the middle of Oakland, or, explore a cacao farm, in the middle of Costa Rica, or, Guinea or something. And so we have to understand like how much technology is taking over our lives and replacing the beauty of just living in nature. And, I hope that we don't go too far in the wrong direction.
Thank you for bringing this up. It was exactly my point in my direction. I am scared about technology, honestly. I do believe that the future will be bright for some people, not for all, unfortunately. I think technology can do a lot, but I'm also seeing where technology is making our life different and not always the best. This 2 hours window for Instacart is definitely spoiling all of us. We give for granted a lot of things that, so we kind of like devalue what we get because it's so fast to get that, I don't know, it kind of like it diminishes the whole purpose. We have, from evolutionary perspective, we were spending the whole day to get to that final meal that we were supposed to catch after a day of like very hard work. And now it's like an underpaid, uninsured person that basically goes to Costco, pick it up and bring it to us. And so I do see how these matchmaking platforms do have a lot of potentials, but also the society is not really, I think, at the same level to protect all the human beings, which are anyway part of the system that the technology is building. So I hope that from a societal perspective, we'll move as fast as technology is moving in order to protect the individuals that I think are still necessary. I don't see a world where AI is going to take over 100% of the work. And so the human beings which are going to take over, like still do a piece of it, will need to be protected somehow. And I think I hope this is going to be possible.
Interesting. Yeah, I think for me, one of my concerns is the snacking trend, and I'm like one of those moms that is like, we sit down and have dinner every night, because I just think that meal moment, there's so much, it's so rich, and I just worry that in this snack world, we're 7 eating moments a day, we're kind of losing the community aspect of food a little bit as well. All right, but not to end on a pessimistic note, although I appreciate all the optimism you guys brought into my pessimistic question there. But we have a lot of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial thinkers listening in on this panel. So I would love to hear closing thoughts for our last question here on kind of what do you wish was out there that maybe isn't yet, right? Where are those key, you know, innovation needs that maybe haven't yet been met, and that could propel us to an even better place?
Okay, I know this is a food-centric panel, but in my world, when we're looking at, you know, consumer product goods, we've seen a ton of innovation, right? I mean, that innovation's been going on in food and bev for a long time. What I would love to see is a lot of innovation and people tackling the problems in like a CVS, like the personal care. What does that look like to really just create some amazing products going forward, especially as it relates to the waste with the plastic and the bottling and the ingredients that are being created. I think that's where the most amount of white space is. And I would love just to see more products emerging there.
All right, new CVS aisles, I like it. Riana, to you?
You know, my mind went down two different paths here. I am very interested in seeing how the creator economy merges with food. I like to take a lot of time and also urge my team to take a lot of time exploring their artistic endeavors. We're very design driven and like artsy driven team. And we like to consider like the whole realm of like what art means to the world and to innovation. But then my mind really ended up on like some of our biggest challenges. And of course I always think about health, but then you have this like subset of health that's like mental health, and maybe to extend off of Kirstin's you know, interest in redefining experiences at wellness centers. But I don't think that our public office is going to step up in a way that we need or traditionally have seen in providing mental health services to millions of people, to billions of people really around the world. And so I think it's up to, in food, especially with the gut microbiome access, I think it's up to a lot of food innovators to figure out ways to create better for you foods that improve our mental health, that improve our mood, that improve anxiety, which affects so many millions of people every single day and cause other deleterious effects in society. And so I think innovation around food and elimination of things that are causing the effects of mental health really change in the next few years. And so I'm excited about the growth in that area.
And on my side, I would like to see a food communication space. So like communication around food and beverage being more focused on minorities, which I like. Yeah, I would say minorities. Like I think in the past years we said a lot around marketing people and designing people also for women. And I think now it's also the time to think about other kind of population, which is not just the white, rich, wealthy people living in the Bay Area. And I mean, as Riana was saying before, 8% of African Americans are vegan. Are we communicating products to this specific, are we designing communication for this specific audience? Really not often. And I would like to see more around that.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you. Kirstin had to drop off because we are right at the hour here. So what a great conversation. I would love to get some very healthy, non-anxiety causing wine with all of you ladies and talk about it for another hour someday. But in the meantime, just wanted to say thank you. I also am optimistic. I think there's plenty to be done, but also so many good things happening. And you guys are a key part of that. So thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for listening in today. And here's to a better future of food.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you.
All right, take care.